It was a Tuesday, a day like any other in the bustling yet somewhat predictable newsroom of the Albuquerque Journal. My name was Sarah, and at 28 I considered myself a dogged investigative journalist, though most of my assignments lately had been focused on local zoning disputes or the occasional missing cat story. I longed for something real, something that would shake the foundations, a story that mattered. Little did I know, that Tuesday was about to deliver exactly that, in the most unexpected way. The package arrived anonymously, as these things often do in the movies, but rarely in real life. No return address, just a plain brown wrapper taped shut with industrial precision. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in its unspoken promise of gravity. My name, Sarah Jenkins, was scrawled on it in hurried, almost panicked handwriting. My heart gave a little jolt. This wasn't another angry reader's letter about a misspelled street name. I took it to my desk, my usual chaotic space, overflowing with stacks of newspapers, half-empty coffee mugs, and post-it notes. My editor, a gruff but fair man named Frank, barely glanced up from his computer, too engrossed in the latest city council scandal. "Something interesting, Jenkins?" he grunted without looking. "Could be, Frank, could be." Inside the package, nested amongst layers of crinkled newspaper, was an old, battered briefcase. It was the kind you'd see in spy movies from the 70s, scuffed leather, rusty latches. My fingers trembled slightly as I clicked them open. The contents weren't what I expected, yet they immediately sent a chill down my spine. There were no flashy documents, no dramatic confessions. Instead, there was a stack of incredibly grainy black and white photographs. They depicted what looked like highly classified blueprints, strange symbols, and complex diagrams that made no sense to my untrained eye. Mixed in were what appeared to be crude, hand-drawn maps of an underground facility, overlaid with meticulous notes in a tiny, almost indecipherable script. And then there were the reports, typed, carbon-copied, some with handwritten annotations in red ink, all marked top secret or for eyes only. But it was the subject matter that truly arrested my attention. The words jumped out at me. Project Mongoose, biogenetic research, extraterrestrial liaison, level 7 Dulce. Dulce. The name echoed in my mind. A small, remote town in northern New Mexico, mostly known for its Jicarilla Apache reservation and vast empty landscapes. What could be so secret, so deeply hidden beneath a place like Dulce? One photograph in particular made my blood run cold. It was a blurry, distant shot of what looked like a massive, circular entrance carved directly into the side of a mesa. The image was dark, ominous, and undeniably artificial. A sense of unease settled over me, a feeling that I had just stumbled upon something far larger, far more dangerous than anything I could have imagined. This wasn't just a story. It was a rabbit hole, and I had just taken the first terrifying step. My sleepy Tuesday afternoon had just become a doorway to a nightmare. That night, sleep was a distant luxury. My apartment, usually a haven of quiet solitude, felt suddenly exposed, as if the very walls could hear the secrets I now possessed. The documents from the briefcase were spread across my living room floor, a chaotic mosaic of government blackouts and chilling revelations. Each file I deciphered, each grainy photograph I scrutinized, only pulled me further into the abyss of the Dulce base enigma. One particular document, a faded memo dated 1979, detailed a security breach at the facility. It mentioned non-human entities and unauthorized access to biolabs. My mind reeled. Non-human entities? It sounded like something straight out of a science fiction novel, yet the sterile, bureaucratic language of the memo made it terrifyingly real. It wasn't written by a fantasist. It was written by someone who took this threat, these entities, seriously. Another set of papers seemed to be personnel records, but for individuals with code names like Watcher and Overseer. Their job descriptions were vague, filled with jargon like interspecies communication protocols and containment procedures. Below these were cryptic notes about levels of cooperation and unforeseen genetic drift. What were they containing? What kind of cooperation was happening and with whom? And then there were the blueprints. They depicted a multi-layered underground complex stretching deep beneath the earth. I traced the 7 levels with my finger, each descending further into the unknown. Level 1 seemed to be standard security and communication. Level 2, housing and administrative. But as I went deeper, the descriptions became more disturbing. Level 4 was labeled Human-Animal Genetic Research. Level 5, Alien Observation and Control. And Level 6, the most chilling of all, Private Alien Sector. What was in Level 7? The deepest point. The blueprints only showed a vast, unlabeled cavern. My imagination, fueled by fear and curiosity, filled in the blanks with the most unsettling possibilities. My initial journalistic skepticism began to crumble under the weight of the evidence. This wasn't just a wild conspiracy theory. This was meticulously documented information, albeit highly fragmented and obscured. Someone, a former insider perhaps, had gone to great lengths to compile this and get it out. They clearly wanted the truth revealed, even if it meant risking everything. I needed to verify this, but how? The documents were too sensitive to show anyone yet, even Frank. My first thought was to cross-reference names, dates, and locations. A quick search on my laptop for Dulce, New Mexico underground base yielded a handful of obscure forums and fringe websites, all buzzing with whispers of alien bases, secret experiments, and government cover-ups. They were dismissed by mainstream media as lunatic ravings, but now with the documents in front of me, those ravings seemed to take on a terrifying new legitimacy. One name kept reappearing in these online discussions: Philip Schneider. He was an alleged whistleblower from the 90s, claiming to have worked on the Dulce base and witnessed horrific things, even engaging in a firefight with aliens. Mainstream media had discredited him, but the details in his claims, the levels of the base, the types of experiments, eerily mirrored the documents I held. Could his wild stories actually be based on a suppressed truth? A cold dread began to seep into my bones. This wasn't just a story about aliens. It was a story about unimaginable power, about government secrecy on a scale I couldn't comprehend, and about what happens when humanity makes pacts with forces it doesn't understand. I had opened the briefcase, and now I felt like I had opened Pandora's box. There was no turning back. The truth, however unsettling, had to be uncovered, and I, Sarah Jenkins, was now its reluctant, terrified guardian. The next morning, armed with a thermos of strong coffee and a pounding headache, I made a decision. I couldn't go to Frank yet, not with this. He'd either laugh me out of the newsroom or, worse, shut down my investigation for being too fringe. I needed something, anything, concrete enough to present as more than just a collection of anonymous, undated papers. My first step was to find a living source, someone, anyone, who could corroborate even a fraction of what these documents claimed. The name Philip Schneider kept gnawing at me. While his claims were sensationalized, the detailed descriptions of the base levels and experiments in his interviews aligned far too perfectly with the blueprints and memos I had. Schneider himself was long dead, his death officially ruled a suicide, though many in the conspiracy community believed he was silenced. But he had a network, supporters, people he had spoken to. My research led me to an obscure online forum dedicated to truth seekers and ufologists, specifically those who believed in Schneider's story. It was a digital hive of passionate, often eccentric individuals. Sifting through the noise, I found a handle that appeared repeatedly,
always with insightful comments and references to first-hand accounts. Desert Fox. This individual seemed to possess an encyclopedic knowledge of Schneider's claims and the Dulce base lore. I sent a private message, carefully crafting my words to sound credible, but not overtly desperate or insane. I mentioned my journalistic background, and more importantly, I subtly referenced details from the documents, specific code names and project titles that only someone with inside knowledge or access to similar information would recognize. I held my breath, wondering if my message would be ignored, or worse, if it would attract unwanted attention from the very forces I was investigating. Hours later, as the newsroom began to empty for the evening, my laptop chimed. A reply. From Desert Fox. My heart leapt into my throat. The message was short, cryptic, and incredibly direct. Meet me. Old Diner, Route 66, outside Gallup. Midnight. Come alone. Don't bring anyone you trust. Gallup was a 2-hour drive from Albuquerque, deep into the stark, beautiful, and often lonely landscapes of western New Mexico. Midnight in an old diner on a deserted stretch of Route 66 screamed cliché, but also felt utterly authentic to the clandestine nature of this whole affair. Don't bring anyone you trust. The words chilled me. It wasn't just about secrecy. It was about danger. I told Frank I was going on a late-night drive to pursue a lead on a local interest piece, a flimsy excuse he barely registered. As I drove west, the city lights faded, replaced by the vast, star-dusted canvas of the desert sky. The radio crackled with static, mirroring the unease in my mind. Every passing truck seemed to linger too long in my rearview mirror. Every shadow cast by the sparse desert shrubs seemed to move. My journalistic instincts were screaming, not just with excitement for a scoop, but with an unfamiliar, primal fear. Was I walking into a trap? Was Desert Fox a legitimate source, or a plant? Or, even worse, a deluded individual who would waste my time? The briefcase, now hidden securely in my trunk, felt like a ticking bomb. But the hunger for truth, the sheer audacity of what these documents suggested, propelled me forward. I had to know. I had to see. The dusty neon-lit sign of the diner finally appeared on the horizon, a beacon in the vast darkness. My future, and perhaps the truth about Dulce, waited inside.
The air inside the diner was thick with the smell of stale coffee and forgotten dreams. It was almost empty, save for a tired-looking waitress wiping down the counter and an old man hunched over a slice of pie in a far booth. I scanned the faces, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. No one looked like a desert fox. Then, from the darkest corner booth, a voice spoke, low and gravelly, like desert wind over ancient stones. Sarah Jenkins, I presume? I turned. In the shadows sat a man who looked like he'd been carved from the very landscape outside. His face was weathered, a road map of wrinkles, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold generations of secrets. He wore a worn-out denim jacket and a faded baseball cap pulled low. He looked unassuming, yet there was an intensity about him that commanded attention. He gestured to the seat opposite him. Sit and order something. You look like you've seen a ghost. I slid into the booth, trying to project an air of calm I definitely didn't feel. You're Desert Fox? He gave a small, wry smile, one of many names I've used over the years, but yes, for our purposes, that will do. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. You mentioned some interesting details in your message. Project Mongoose, Level 7. Where did you get that information? I hesitated, weighing my options. He was testing me. From a package, anonymous. It contained documents, blueprints, photos. His gaze didn't waver. And you believe them? I don't know what to believe, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. But
They align too closely with things I've heard, things Philip Schneider claimed. It's too much to dismiss." He leaned back, his eyes still fixed on mine. Schneider was a brave man, and a fool. He knew too much, and he talked too much. They don't like that. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. "You're playing a dangerous game, Sarah, more dangerous than you can imagine." "Who are they?" I asked, pushing aside the fear. "The government? Some secret organization?" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Both and neither. It's more complicated than simple black and white. The lines blur when you deal with what lies beneath Dulce." He paused, then leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I worked there, not as a scientist, not as an alien liaison. I was security, a grunt, on the outer perimeter for a time. But I saw enough, heard enough, connected enough dots to know what kind of horror was being perpetrated down there." My breath hitched, a first-hand witness. This was it. "What did you see?" He closed his eyes for a moment, as if recalling a painful memory. "Things no human should ever witness. Genetic experiments, creations, things that weren't meant to exist. And the Greys, they were there, not just as visitors, but as collaborators, and in some ways, masters." He told me stories of a massive, multi-level facility, just like the blueprints I possessed. He spoke of incredible technology, reverse-engineered from crashed UFOs, but then his tone darkened. He described seeing human beings, people who went missing from the surface, being brought into the facility, never to return. He spoke of the terrifying, almost sterile indifference of the Greys and the chilling compliance of certain human scientists. "Level 7, he said, his voice barely audible, is where they keep the truly unspeakable, the things that even the highest-ranking human personnel are afraid of. It's not just a holding pen, it's a portal, or something close to it, an access point to something else." He pulled a folded, aged photograph from his wallet and slid it across the table. It was a blurry, candid shot, taken from a distance. It showed what looked like a group of men in military fatigues, alongside several tall, slender figures with large heads and dark eyes, the classic Greys of UFO lore. But the chilling detail was the background, a cavernous, metallic-walled chamber eerily similar to sections of the blueprints I possessed. "This," he whispered, "was taken inside Level 5, before I got out." My hands trembled as I picked up the photograph. It was the corroboration I desperately needed, but it also brought the horrific reality of Dulce into sharp, terrifying focus. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a weary sadness. "Because someone has to. Because the truth, no matter how ugly, demands to be seen. And because I'm running out of time. They're always watching, Sarah, always listening, and they don't like people like us. Be careful. Very, very careful." He stood up abruptly, leaving a few crumpled bills on the table for his untouched pie. "That's all I can tell you tonight. You have enough to start. Now it's up to you what you do with it. But remember, once you open this door, you can never truly close it." With that, the Desert Fox walked out of the diner and disappeared into the vast, silent New Mexico night, leaving me alone with a photograph, a terrifying story, and a chilling warning.
The drive back to Albuquerque was a blur of adrenaline and fear. Desert Fox's words echoed in my mind, a chilling mantra of warnings and revelations. The photograph he gave me was clutched tightly in my hand, its grainy image burning itself into my memory. This wasn't just a conspiracy theory anymore. It was a tangible, terrifying reality, and I was now inextricably linked to it. Back in my apartment, I spread out all the materials again. The anonymous package, my notes from Desert Fox's testimony, and now his corroborating photo. The pieces were starting to form a coherent, albeit horrifying picture. The Dulce base was real. The alien collaboration was real. The experiments were real. My next step, I decided, had to be historical. If such a massive clandestine project existed, there had to be faint traces in public records, in local legends, in the forgotten corners of history. I started digging into the history of Dulce and the surrounding areas. I spent days poring over old newspaper archives, military reports, the declassified, heavily redacted ones, and geological surveys of the Jicarilla Apache Reservation. I found references to peculiar land acquisitions by the federal government in the 1960s and 70s, under the guise of natural resource exploration or strategic defense initiatives. The sheer scale of these land purchases, often in incredibly remote and otherwise uninteresting areas, raised red flags. There were also isolated reports in local papers from decades past, strange lights in the sky, cattle mutilations attributed to cults, and even a few unexplained disappearances of individuals, often dismissed as drifters or runaways. Alone, these incidents meant little, but viewed through the lens of the Dulce documents, they took on a sinister new meaning. One particular anomaly caught my eye. A surge in seismic activity around the Dulce area in the late 1960s and early 1970s. While New Mexico is prone to earthquakes, these weren't typical. They were often described as deep tremors or non-tectonic vibrations, some even occurring at regular intervals, almost like drilling, large-scale underground drilling. I also stumbled upon a forgotten local legend among the Jicarilla Apache people. Whispers of the shadow place, or the place where spirits descend, deep within the earth, long before any government presence. Their oral traditions spoke of ancient beings from the sky and sacred sites where the veil between worlds was thin. It sounded like folklore, but considering the possibility of a centuries-old alien presence or ancient portals, it suddenly didn't seem so far-fetched. Could the base simply be an expansion of something already there, something ancient and powerful? My investigation also led me to files on Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's official investigation into UFOs. While publicly declared closed with no evidence of alien craft, many of its internal memos, now partially declassified, showed clear signs of internal dissent and frustration. Some field agents reported credible sightings that were summarily dismissed or explained away by their superiors. There was a palpable sense that a different, far more secretive program was running in parallel, siphoning off the most compelling evidence. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, forming a mosaic of historical cover-ups and deliberate obfuscation. Every coincidence, every unexplained phenomenon now seemed to point to the same chilling conclusion. The truth about Dulce had been meticulously woven into the fabric of American history, disguised as natural events, folklore, or simply dismissed as the ramblings of the insane. But the more I uncovered, the more exposed I felt. The Desert Fox's warning echoed in my ears. They're always watching. I've started noticing subtle things. A car parked a little too long down my street. An unusual amount of static on my phone calls. My emails sometimes failing to send on the first try. Paranoia? Or the first subtle signs that my investigation was drawing the wrong kind of attention? I couldn't be sure, but the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, began to creep into my every waking moment and even into my uneasy dreams. The past was not just echoing, it was reaching out to grab me. The subtle signs of surveillance
quickly escalated to something undeniable. It started with my digital life. My computer would occasionally freeze, then suddenly refresh, almost as if someone had remote access. My phone battery, which once was reliable, began draining inexplicably, even when not in use. Then came the physical manifestations. My apartment building's normally silent hallway would sometimes creak at odd hours, footsteps too light, too deliberate to be a neighbor. My mail, which usually shoved carelessly into my box, was sometimes neatly arranged, as if someone had opened it and then resealed it with meticulous care. Frank, my editor, noticed my growing distraction. "Jenkins, you're looking like you've been wrestling alligators," he remarked one afternoon, eyeing the dark circles under my eyes. "Everything all right with your local interest piece?" I just mumbled something about long nights and elusive sources, unwilling to reveal the true nature of my obsession. The thought of bringing him into this, of exposing him to the danger I now felt, was unbearable. I was alone in this, and that made the burden of the truth even heavier. One evening, as I was leaving the newsroom late, I spotted it. A black, nondescript sedan parked a block down, its windows tinted. I'd seen it before, or one just like it, near my apartment. My heart hammered. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was real. They were watching me, just like Desert Fox had warned. The fear, however, only solidified my resolve. Retreating was no longer an option. I had seen too much, knew too much. The thought of those experimental horrors in Dulce, the human-alien collaborations, and the unimaginable things in Level 7 fueled a desperate need to expose it all, no matter the personal cost. I needed more than just historical archives and cryptic online forums. I needed a specialist, someone with deep technical knowledge of clandestine operations, government black projects, and perhaps even extraterrestrial technology. My mind immediately went to Dr. Eris Thorne. He was an emeritus professor of astrophysics at UNM, a brilliant but controversial figure who had lost his tenure years ago after publicly advocating for the serious scientific study of UFOs, claiming the government was suppressing vital information. He was a pariah in academic circles, but revered in the underground world of ufology. He was my long shot. Finding his contact information was surprisingly easy. His theories were well documented online. Reaching out to him, however, felt like a leap of faith. I sent an email carefully mentioning Project Mongoose and Level 7, hinting that I had tangible evidence. His reply came back within minutes. "Come to my observatory, tonight. Bring everything. And be discreet. They watch me too." His observatory was not on campus, but a small, privately owned structure nestled in the foothills outside Albuquerque, far from city lights. As I drove, I saw the black sedan again, several cars behind me, maintaining a steady distance. My palms were sweaty on the steering wheel. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a race against an unseen enemy. The observatory itself was modest, a dome perched atop a small, unassuming building. Dr. Thorne met me at the door. He was a man in his late 60s with a wild mane of white hair, sharp, intelligent eyes, and an air of both genius and eccentricity. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You have something for me, young lady?" he asked, his voice eager, almost manic. I laid out the documents, the blueprints, Desert Fox's photograph. Dr. Thorne's eyes widened with each new piece of evidence. He meticulously examined the cryptic symbols on the blueprints, muttering complex equations and theories to himself. He used a powerful magnifying glass to scrutinize the photograph, his finger tracing the outline of the grays. "My God," he finally whispered, looking up at me, his eyes shining with a mix of wonder and dread. "This is it, Sarah. This is everything we've been trying to prove for decades. The Dulce base, it's real. And this photograph, this is irrefutable proof of their presence and their collaboration."
He pointed to a small, almost imperceptible detail in the background of Desert Fox's photo, a unique power conduit design he recognized from obscure leaked government patents he had studied. This technology, it's not ours. Not entirely, anyway. It's a hybrid, reverse-engineered perhaps, but with unmistakable alien influence. He looked at me, a profound gravity in his gaze. You've stumbled onto the most dangerous secret in human.
Dr. Thorne's observatory became our command center, a haven of scientific inquiry against the backdrop of an increasingly hostile world. He was a whirlwind of energy, his mind racing through theories, connections, and potential avenues for exposure. The urgency in his eyes mirrored my own. We had proof, but proof without a platform was useless and dangerous. "We can't just drop this on the Albuquerque Journal's doorstep," Thorne stated, pacing excitedly among his telescopes and star charts. "They'd bury it, or worse, expose you before we've gathered enough support. The government has deep roots everywhere, Sarah, especially in media." His plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but it made a twisted kind of sense. We wouldn't go to mainstream media first. Instead, we would leak the most compelling pieces of evidence: the Desert Fox photo, key sections of the blueprints, and Desert Fox's initial testimony to a network of independent journalists and respected ufologists simultaneously. The goal was to create a ripple effect, a wave of information that would be too widespread to fully suppress. He explained, tapping furiously on his computer, "We need to create noise, so much noise that they can't silence it all. It will force their hand. They'll have to respond, and in their response, they will reveal more." My role was crucial. I, as the initial recipient of the package and the one with the direct contact to Desert Fox, would serve as the primary anonymous source for this network. Thorne, with his established but controversial reputation, would provide the scientific credibility, framing the data in a way that would appeal to serious researchers, not just fringe enthusiasts. We spent the next few days in a frantic blur, fueled by caffeine and a shared sense of impending doom and exhalation. Thorne showed me how to use encrypted communication channels, how to mask IP addresses, and how to create dead-drop email accounts. He was surprisingly adept at digital subterfuge, a skill he'd honed over years of trying to outmaneuver the Watchers. "Every detail matters, Sarah," he warned, his eyes stern. "One mistake, one slip-up, and not only is the truth buried forever, but we become another statistic." As we worked, the sense of being watched intensified. The black sedan became a more frequent sight. My phone would ring with anonymous calls that hung up the moment I answered. Thorne, ever vigilant, installed a series of motion-activated cameras around his observatory. They often showed nothing, but sometimes a fleeting shadow, a brief glint of light in the darkness, suggested activity beyond the natural wildlife. One night, while meticulously scanning the digital copies of the blueprints, I noticed something new, something I'd overlooked in my initial haste. A series of tiny, almost microscopic symbols etched along the perimeter of Level 7. They weren't standard engineering notations. Thorne immediately recognized them. He said it was ancient Sumerian and a dialect he's only ever seen in texts related to stargates and interdimensional travel. This isn't just a base, Sarah. This is a gateway, a very old, very powerful gateway. The revelation was staggering. It wasn't just about aliens visiting Earth. It was about ancient connections, about dimensions beyond our understanding, about a power source that could transcend time and space itself. Level 7 wasn't just a research facility. It was the key to something far more profound and terrifying. Our plan, however risky, had to proceed. The world needed to know, not just about the government's secrets, but about the universe-altering implications of Dulce. We finalized the data packets, encrypting them with multiple layers of security. Our target release time was set. Exactly 3 a.m. EST, ensuring maximum global impact as news cycles began in different time zones. As the clock ticked down, a new kind of fear settled in. Not just of being caught, but of what might happen if we succeeded. What would the world do with this truth? What would be the consequences of opening this Pandora's box? But there was no turning back. With a deep breath and a shared glance of grim determination with Dr. Thorne, I initiated the encrypted upload. The packets of truth, like digital messengers, began their journey into the vast, unpredictable expanse of the internet. The war for disclosure had officially begun. The hours following the upload were a blur of nervous anticipation. We sat in the observatory. The only sounds the whirring of Thorne's computers and the frantic beat of my own heart. The silence was punctuated only by Thorne's quiet updates, his eyes glued to various news aggregators and independent forums. "It's spreading, Sarah," he exclaimed, a triumphant grin breaking through his usual stoicism. "First the fringe sites, then the more reputable independent outlets. They're picking it up. The photo, the blueprints, the testimony. It's going viral." My stomach lurched with a mix of elation and dread. We had done it. We had pushed the first domino. The truth was out there, scattering across the digital landscape like wildfire. But then, the counteroffensive began. Initially, it was subtle. Online, a coordinated campaign of disinformation and ridicule flooded comment sections. Bots and anonymous accounts popped up dismissing the leaks as fake news, CGI hoaxes, or the ramblings of lunatics. Mainstream media outlets, after a brief, hesitant acknowledgement of the viral conspiracy theory, quickly pivoted to dismissive reports, quoting anonymous government sources who labeled the documents as elaborate forgeries. But the physical world mirrored the digital. The surveillance intensified dramatically. The black sedan was no longer discreet. It was openly parked across the street from the observatory, its inoccupants making no effort to hide their presence. We began to see other vehicles too, unmarked vans, appearing and disappearing with unnerving frequency. The phone calls, once mere hang-ups, now carried static-laden threats, often just a single word: stop. One afternoon, as Thorne was analyzing the spread of the leak, his security cameras flagged an anomaly. A figure, cloaked in black, moving with unnatural speed and stealth, scaling the fence perimeter of the observatory grounds. Not military, not typical agents. This was something else. A professional. "They're coming for us, Sarah," Thorne stated, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold resignation. He grabbed a small, hardened laptop from a locked drawer. "This contains everything: raw data, our analysis, backups. If anything happens to us, you have to ensure this gets out to someone truly trustworthy." He gave me a contact name, a former colleague from his pre-Pariah days, a man he still believed possessed unwavering integrity. Before I could fully process his instructions, a blinding flash of light erupted from the woods surrounding the observatory. A deafening crack followed, and the dome, where Thorne often conducted his nighttime observations, splintered with a terrifying sound of breaking glass and twisted metal. An unknown projectile. This wasn't a warning shot, it was an attack. "Get down," Thorne shouted, pushing me to the floor. "They're not playing anymore." The power flickered, then died. The observatory plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the frantic glow of Thorne's remaining battery-powered screens and the distant, ominous red and blue flashing lights approaching up the dirt road. Sirens, now distinctly audible. They hadn't just attacked, they had created a pretext for a full-scale raid. "There's a back exit through the old tunnel under the hill," Thorn yelled over the din, shoving the laptop into my hands. "Go, now, don't look back. The truth is more important than us." I hesitated, wanting to help him to stay and fight, but his eyes were resolute, fierce. "Go, Sarah, this is your only chance." With a lump in my throat and the heavy weight of the laptop in my grasp, I scrambled towards the barely visible escape hatch Thorn had indicated. The sound of heavy boots pounding on the gravel outside, shouting voices, and the distinct click of weapons being readied filled the air. I looked back one last time. Thorn was standing, defiant, facing the main entrance, ready to buy me time, ready to be sacrificed for the truth he had dedicated his life to. His face, illuminated by the flashing lights, was a mask of grim determination. "Tell them everything, Sarah!" he roared as the front door burst inward with a resounding crash. I squeezed through the narrow tunnel, the cold earth pressing in on me, the sounds of chaos and confrontation fading behind me. I didn't know what would happen to Dr. Thorn, but I knew I couldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. I had to get away. I had to survive, and I had to ensure the full, terrifying truth about Dulce.
I emerged from the cold, damp tunnel into the crisp, desert night, gasping for air. The sounds of the raid on the observatory were muffled now, distant echoes of the sacrifice Thorn had just made. My heart was a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, fueled by grief, fear, and a burning resolve. The laptop, clutched tight in my hands, felt like both a burden and a lifeline. It contained the complete, unadulterated truth. I ran, blindly at first, through the thorny brush and over uneven terrain, guided only by the distant glow of Albuquerque's city lights. Every rustle in the bushes, every hoot of an owl sent shivers down my spine. They would be looking for me. They would know I had the laptop. I was no longer a journalist. I was a fugitive, carrying the most dangerous secret on Earth. My car was still parked far down the access road to the observatory. I knew it would be compromised, likely already under surveillance. I couldn't risk going back for it. My only option was to disappear, to become invisible. I walked for what felt like hours, my legs burning, until I reached a sparsely populated rural road. A faint sense of desperation set in. I was alone, miles from anywhere, with no phone, no money, and no clear plan. Then, a stroke of luck. An old, beat-up pickup truck rattled past, then surprisingly slowed down. The driver, a kind-faced elderly woman with a weathered cowboy hat, leaned out the window. "You all right, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. Need a ride?" Against every instinct to trust no one, I got in. Her name was Martha, and she was heading towards a small, remote town called Mountain Air, about an hour away, to visit her sister. I fabricated a story about my car breaking down and needing to get to a bus station. She bought it, or at least pretended to. Her eyes held a knowing kindness, as if she sensed there was more to my story than I was letting on. During the quiet drive, I wrestled with my conscience. Thorn had given me a contact, a trusted former colleague, but I was still being hunted. To approach anyone now was to put them in immediate danger. I needed to be smarter, more strategic. My mind raced, trying to formulate a new plan. I couldn't go back to my apartment, couldn't contact anyone I knew. I needed a place to hide, a way to access the internet securely, and a path to get Thorn's data to the trusted contact without leading them straight to him. As Martha dropped me off at the small, deserted bus stop in Mountain Air, she pressed a crumpled $20 bill into my hand. "Looks like you're in a heap of trouble, dear. But remember, the desert hides many secrets, and sometimes those who live closest to the earth know the most." Her words were surprisingly poignant, a subtle nod to the deep, hidden truths of New Mexico. I used the $20 to buy a cheap, prepaid burner phone and found a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. It was dingy, but it had Wi-Fi.
my only connection to the outside world, my only weapon. In the solitude of that shabby room, I began to work. I activated the laptop, marveling at Thorne's foresight. It was an encrypted fortress designed to withstand sophisticated attacks. I knew I couldn't simply email the data. It would be intercepted. I needed an indirect approach. My new plan was to break the data into smaller, encrypted packets and use a dead drop system across various obscure online forums and dark web archives, a digital breadcrumb trail. Then, I would send an anonymous, untraceable message to Thorne's trusted contact, providing cryptic clues on how to retrieve and reassemble the fragments. It was slow, tedious work, but it was the safest way. As I uploaded the first fragment, a sudden, sharp rap on my motel room door made me jump. My heart seized. Had they found me already? I froze, laptop open on the bed, my breath caught in my throat. The rap came again, louder this time. I looked through the pee-hole, my hand trembling. No one. Just the empty, dimly lit corridor. A trick of the light? Or a psychological game? My paranoia was now my constant companion. I knew then that this wasn't just about exposing Dulce. It was about survival, about outsmarting an enemy that had limitless resources and an absolute willingness to eliminate anyone who stood in their way. But with Thorne's sacrifice echoing in my ears and the weight of the truth in my hands, I knew I would not stop. Not now, not ever. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and relentless digital guerrilla warfare. From the dingy motel room, I meticulously broke Thorne's data into dozens of encrypted fragments, each disguised and hidden across various corners of the internet. Obscure gaming forums, forgotten academic archives, even encoded within public domain digital art files. It was a digital needle in the haystack, designed to be almost impossible to find without the exact sequence of clues. Finally, the last fragment was uploaded. Then I crafted an anonymous, untraceable message, a series of complex riddles and coordinates hinting at the locations of the fragmented data. This message, along with the contact name Thorne had given me, was sent to his former colleague. The truth was now scattered, waiting to be reassembled. My mission, at least the immediate part of it, was complete, but my safety was far from guaranteed. The feeling of being hunted intensified with each passing hour. I knew they were closing in, the faceless, nameless them who had operated in the shadows for decades, protecting the secrets of Dulce. I couldn't stay in mountain air. I needed to move, to vanish. My only hope was to become a ghost, to disappear into the vastness of the American landscape, trusting that Thorne's contact would be able to piece together the puzzle and expose the truth. I packed the few meager belongings I had, leaving the burner phone and the laptop, now wiped clean and rendered useless, in the motel room. A final, defiant act, denying them the satisfaction of capturing my tools. I left the motel under the cover of a moonless night, blending into the darkness. My journey became a blur of dusty bus stations, anonymous truck stops, and countless hours hitchhiking with strangers whose faces I would never remember. I dyed my hair, changed my clothes, adopted new mannerisms. I shed Sarah Jenkins, the tenacious journalist, and became no one, a phantom drifting through small towns and forgotten highways. I saw my face, briefly, on a news report in a bus station TV, a grainy photo labeled missing person with veiled suggestions of a mental breakdown. They were already controlling the narrative. Weeks turned into months. I found work as a waitress in a diner in rural Oklahoma, then as a farmhand in Texas. Each night I scanned the news, devouring every article, every whisper on independent forums, searching for any sign that the data had been found, that the truth about Dulce had finally broken through. And then, one day, it happened. A small, independent news outlet, known for its integrity and willingness to challenge the status quo, published an article. It was carefully worded, cautious, but unmistakable. It referenced newly discovered documents and corroborated testimonies concerning a classified underground facility in New Mexico. It mentioned unprecedented claims of human extraterrestrial collaboration. The desert fox photograph, though blurred, was there. The article credited anonymous sources for bringing the information to light, but I knew. Thorne's contact had done it. They had found the breadcrumbs. The dam had broken. The initial response was predictable: outrage, denial, ridicule. But this time it was different. Too many pieces were in place. Other independent outlets picked it up, citing the original report. Whistleblowers, emboldened by the leak, began to cautiously step forward, adding their own fragments of truth. The official denials from the government seemed weaker, more desperate. The carefully constructed facade around Dulce was cracking, slowly but undeniably. I saw a picture of Dr. Thorne's contact, an older, serious-looking man giving a press conference surrounded by legal teams and security. He looked tired, but resolute. He was holding up what looked like a reassembled blueprint. He hadn't forgotten us. He hadn't let Thorne's sacrifice be in vain. As for me, Sarah Jenkins, I remain a ghost. I wandered the vast, beautiful, and secretly terrifying landscapes of America, forever looking over my shoulder, but also forever looking up at the stars. I live in the shadows, not because of fear, but because of necessity. My mission is done, but the battle for full disclosure is far from over. The truth about Dulce is now out there. It's a whisper that has become a roar, a secret that can no longer be contained. And sometimes, late at night, under the immense, indifferent gaze of the desert stars, I wonder what truly lies beneath Level 7. And when will humanity finally be ready to face it?